Society Matters.
Hi, everyone. This is Donna Rosenblum, Director of Education at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center, welcoming you to our next episode of Legacy Chronicles, honoring the past, shaping the future. And I have the privilege today of having Gail Kastenholz, one of our longtime docents and second-generation chairperson here with us today. And we are going to talk about a couple of different things. So to start off, Gail, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so happy that you're with us. And let's start by talking about your parents a little bit. Can you give me a little background of their story?
Okay. So both my parents, Ralph and June Hecht, were Holocaust survivors. Mm-hmm. They came from the same town. It's called Stanislaw in Poland. And it was not really, it was a city, actually. It had 75,000 people.
Wow.
25,000 were Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
My mother came from an upper middle class family. She only had one brother. My father had 12 siblings. Wow. And he was poor, very religious, very different than my mom. And probably they would never have known each other if not for the Holocaust. Until 1941, the Russians were in charge of that part of Poland because it was Eastern Poland. Mm-hmm. And in December 1941, they were put into ghettos, but the town was taken over before that. Now, what happened to them, which I don't know the details because I never really asked about it, unfortunately, they were able to escape the ghetto and they wound up being saved by a righteous Polish farmer. They didn't know each other. They met in where they were being held. They were held in a pigsty where animals usually live, but that's where they were for a year and a half. Mm-hmm. 3 years after being interned in the ghetto, they were freed by the Russians. They then went to a displaced persons camp in northern Germany, which was very unusual. Okay. It was called Eschwege. Mm-hmm.
Was it American occupied or was it
American? But there were Russian soldiers there as well.
Okay.
And the southern part was much more anti-Semitic. The northern part was less anti-Semitic after the war. Mm-hmm. My father did something very extraordinary. He started the first school for Jewish children after the Holocaust. And in his school were children 2 who preschool, children 12 who had been hiding or not been in school for years. And he followed them throughout his lifetime. My parents got married in the displaced persons camp where people were getting married all the time. Mm-hmm. My sister was actually born there as well. Mm-hmm. And they got to America because my mom had a very rich cousin in Brooklyn, New York. You could not come here just because. You had to be sponsored. Mm-hmm. And this cousin sponsored them. They came to Brooklyn. My dad was an accountant in Europe, so he continued with that vocation. My mom actually went back to school to become a licensed Hebrew school teacher, and that's what she did. She taught for many years. And I was the first person in my family born in the United States.
Wow.
And we had I think we had a great life. Mm-hmm. See, I know every survivor's story is different. Every second generation child grew up differently. Mine was fairly like everybody else, except it wasn't American in any way, but there was not that sadness in my family that many people felt over time.
Right. So of your father's 12 siblings, though, how many, so he was in hiding and your mom was in hiding together. How many people were in hiding in this pigsty? Do you have any idea? 18. Okay. And was there anybody?
No family members of my father.
No family members.
3 of the 12 survived.
Okay.
One went to Palestine before the war. Mm-hmm. My aunt went to France and she survived, and my dad. Those were the 3 that survived. And his father was perished during the Holocaust. His mom died of sickness prior. So he had lost an enormous amount of family members during the Holocaust. My mom's had one brother. He also went to Palestine, and he was a very famous architect He built most of the Har HaKarmel in Haifa before Israel became a state. And my mom actually went to visit him right before Second World War and right before they were invaded. And he said, "Could you please stay here?" She said, "I have to go back to take care of our parents."
Right.
So,
yeah.
which was the story a lot of times.
Of course, people didn't know.
Right.
Who's going to know?
So that's what happened.
You could never have foreseen this. So growing up, so you grew up here, you were born here in America, but did your parents have a survivor community that was around? Did you grow up hearing Yiddish? Did you, when did you kind of figure out that your parents were a little different than other parents? Or did you?
That's really a great question and a little bit complicated for me. So my parents spoke Polish, actually, but my father understood 7 languages, as was very common for people that grew up in Europe. And my mom also. My mom came here speaking English very well because she was very educated. My dad learned English from my mother, and by the time I was born, they both spoke English beautifully, and they spoke to me only in English. The issue of being brought up in a survivor community, I really didn't know anything else. I went to a yeshiva where most of the people I knew were Holocaust survivors or descendants, or certainly Jewish. And accents were not foreign to me because everybody had an accent. My parents had a very big social life. They played cards, which a lot of the Polish survivors did. They had a lot of company. They had a lot of friends. Mostly their friends were from the displaced persons camp, interestingly enough. I didn't know much about what happened to them during the actual Holocaust. They didn't talk about it. They did talk about their lives before and their lives after. But that whole piece about what happened to them during the Holocaust was something that I really didn't know that much about. And we didn't really ask.
Right.
The interesting thing about my growing up is my father was born in 1910, okay? So he would now be well over 100. My mom was a few years younger than him. Those survivors were very, very different from the survivors of today. And so I was lucky enough to have met 3 different kinds of survivors over time. When did I feel more about it? I remember my mother crying when I was a little girl because her brother died at a very young age. And I think I understood that he was the last living relative that she had. We had no grandparents. We had no aunts and uncles. All of those things were always there. And my sister actually wrote to Eddie Cantor, who was a famous comedian, if he could be our grandfather.
Wow.
Because it was a loss not to have a grandfather.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And he wrote back. And he sent a certificate that he was adopting us as grandchildren. So he did answer us.
Yeah.
But so that's one way that I didn't know. Then my mother got a job in a summer camp. And her job was to make the announcements. Well, then I realized that she did have an accent for the very first time in my life. It was like, who is that? Right. So that was another thing. And so slowly I really began to understand that I was different and that my life was different. Then when my sister went to Israel, this really changed me. My uncles...
When was that?
My sister went to Israel. She was about 19, so I maybe was 16. In the 60s. And we found out that both of my parents were married before the war. I knew there were pictures cut out of people showing half a picture, but I never really thought about it. And so my aunt, the wife of my mother's brother, said to her, "You didn't know? They both had children." And my sister came back and she was like, "What is that?" So she asked them and they told us. So each of them were married. Each of them had a daughter. And that really changed me in many ways. And they were pretty open about it at that point when we asked. And very much later on, and in the museum, there is a picture of my father with his first wife, which I was very reluctant to put in. And yet the director of the museum at that point said, "Put it in." And I use it with adults and with older children to show what loss really means.
Of course.
Loss and rebirth. And so that also struck me. Then the thing that really made me want to talk about this and do things was when I was a grown-up and I lived in Plainview, and I had a friend, and she found out I was a child of survivors. And she said, "You don't look like one." And she was a Jewish woman, lived in my neighborhood. We both had babies together. I said to her, "What do you mean?
Right.
What is that?" I was supposed to wear a certain costume, and she couldn't explain it. But somehow to her, I became different. I just became different. So most of my friends throughout my life, including now, have been children of Holocaust survivors. So I have really surrounded myself with those kind of people. Although I have friends from all walks of life,
Right.
the connections I make with them are very different and forever. So
Yeah, of course.
that's how I found
Well,
it.
maybe, do you think it's because you don't have to explain yourself? There's an understanding between children of survivors to a certain degree that there's like an unspoken camaraderie.
There's a connection. The connection is almost instant. It's interesting. It's almost instantaneous. As soon as you meet somebody and you know they're children of survivors, there's something that connects you. And they could have parents that were born in a different country.
Oh, yeah.
They could be younger. It doesn't really matter because somehow that connection just happens.
Yeah.
So so for me, it was like a lot of different things that happened over time that made me realize that I wanted to do something about it. And then when they had this big gathering in Israel, and they gave me a name because until then, survivors we didn't really have names. Being a child of survivors didn't exist. Now I became a 2G.
Right.
So now I had a name. So I had something that I was a part of. And that's when I became active.
Right. When did you decide that you wanted to, when did you get involved here at HMTC? Let's start with that.
For most people, or some people, coming to HMTC is the first step. For me, it was like probably the last step that I'm going to make. I've been doing this for over four decades in very different ways. At 30, I became involved in a second generation group, starting the first one on Long Island at the Mid-Island JCC. It started out as a almost therapeutic kind of thing, discussions, there was a psychologist and all of that. And then we realized that we need to do more. So we actually went into schools on our own. We had programs, we had speakers, we did all kinds of things, but we didn't have a home. We did it on our own. And one thing I forgot to mention that also changed my life is that my mom died in the 1970s, okay? I was 23 or 24 years old, and the Holocaust was not known the way it is now.
Right.
The movie Holocaust didn't come out until after she died. Books were not written until after she passed away. And so she never really spoke about it because it wasn't in vogue. And my parents, they were the generation that had a lot of secrets, as I mentioned about, like my family. So her passing away also changed me a great deal. But I became the president of the second generation group. I traveled the country to meet other 2Gs and found that we were all similar again, and that our parents were also alike, which was very interesting. I went to the South, I went to California, I went to Cleveland. I really traveled all over with other 2Gs. And here's the thing. We sat in restaurants and we sang in Yiddish, and nobody bothered us.
Right.
So when you think about anti-Semitism today, if we did that today, God knows what would have happened.
Forget
to us.
it.
We probably would have been thrown out.
Yeah, you would have at least been told, shut up, you,
right.
blah, blah, blah.
English,
English
only.
Yeah, whatever.
But nobody even thought twice about it. It was so interesting to me. We also wrote questions and actually interviewed survivors. We were the first ones to do it. The interviews are still at the Yale Library. We went to Yale to be trained. And the equipment we use are nothing like what we're sitting here using, believe me. We had brought our own lights, and it was unbelievable. My dad never wanted to be interviewed, but he would not be. He was not interested. It was something he didn't want to do. and that was okay.
Yeah. When did he pass away?
He passed away. He was 87 years old, so
Okay.
he lived a long life. He remarried to another Holocaust survivor, and they were married for 20 years actually. So.
Oh wow. Okay. So again, you kind of talked about it. So HMTC. Let's just So when did that happen?
HMTC. After I retired,
Okay.
I decided to come here,
And that was
this
when?
was my home. It's almost 20 years, just about 20 years I've been here, and I found a home.
Yeah.
And that's where I've been. And every time I drive up here, I think of my parents standing on my shoulders and giving me strength. Because when you ask me the question about when did I realize that, about being a child of survivors, it wasn't until I grew up that I really understood their strength and their resilience and everything about them. That was really when I understood who they really were. So and they are right behind me every day of my life. So,
and I'm sure it's extremely meaningful to you to do this work because you hear them, that they're there. There's again that connection. You're still hanging on. They know they're smiling at you. They're very proud, and it all. Yeah, I think it all comes together. So it's very, very important. So at HMTC, not only are you the chair of the Second Generation Committee and doing many things on that note, you also lead school tours, and you do that quite regularly during the course of the school year. And how does that make you feel working with students?
So I spent my career in schools being a speech therapist first and then working with special ed students. And I had a high-level administrative job for many years of my professional life. So I think my biggest assets are my ability to communicate with people and my ability to teach in a way that makes sense. What do I mean by that? So when the students come here, I feel that not only do I teach them, but they also teach me. Because to me, it's very, very, very important to run the tours in a way that gives them the opportunity to be part of it. I really don't lecture. I mean, yes, I give facts, of course, but I do it in a way that brings in personal stories about myself, stories about my parents, stories about other survivors, stories about incidences in history that make the facts and the dates meaningful. Because otherwise, it's just talk.
You want the connection.
And I also want them to understand what happens when people hate and what happens when people don't respond. So I always make sure that the students, I ask them questions, and I think it really works. Discussion makes a difference. It's very, very different. So I run my tours a little bit different than most people, especially because I talk about my parents. But in general, I think the idea of students coming here is to learn that they have choices and roles and behaviors that make a difference. And what you say and what you do matters.
Exactly.
And so this slippery slope that went from words to genocide during the Holocaust is truly something that I go through with them as we go through the museum.
Yes.
And hopefully they will understand and take that into the world they live in today. Because for me, that's the most important part.
Yeah. Exactly. I agree with you 100%, and I feel
and even
strongly
when
that.
I also do the police.
Yes, you do.
Which is done in the same way. The nursing program, all the programs. You have to try and make this connection that history matters.
Yes.
Okay, history is a tool that helps us in life, that changes who we are. And if we don't pay attention to history, then we won't know when something's happening. And it's likely to be repeated because we're not paying attention.
Right. So. Yeah. No, it's beautifully said, Gail. And I'm with you 100%. And that's the whole reason for the mission of what we do here, what we try to accomplish, and we want kids to own it. We want them to be invested in it. And we want them to understand that they can wake up tomorrow and they could be different. That, whatever they did in the past can stay in the past, and tomorrow's a new day. Every day is a new day, and you wake up and you say, how do I want this day to unfold? Right? It's a hard lesson even for everyone. Every day is a new day. And we need to take it that way. The glass is always half full, not half empty. I think we have so much struggle today of intense blame and intense you owe me and intense I'm the victim and that's all very well and good. But how do you conduct yourself? You
have to take onus of who you are. And do something about it. So you can't just stand back. You can't, and that's not that easy.
It's not
to stand up.
Right, and you have to really look at your own self and evaluate yourself. So I was just at Sleet Hote services Saturday night at Temple, and every time I go to Sleet Hote, I always, the whole service is really all about that. Right, you want to make the world a better place. You want to come into the holiday. Handling all of the, putting things to rest, putting things to bed, coming into the new year on the right foot. And a lot of it is self-reflection. And a lot of it is looking at yourself and saying, what did I do that was wrong? What did I do? How did I wrong people? How did I make mistakes? And how am I going to repair that so that the year starts off the right way?
Right.
It's a tall order. And I'm sure,
especially for kids, because kids, they don't think like that.
No, they don't.
So that's part of my way of reaching them, I guess, because I talk a lot about that as we go through the museum. In addition to giving context and facts, because you have to do both. You have to do both,
of course.
So that's basically how I do it. And the second part of what I do is very rewarding to me. Being the head of the 2Gs, I find incredibly rewarding. We support the survivors. We each have taken on one or two survivors as our own. And we check in on them and we make sure they're doing okay. And they love it.
Yes.
And they really love it. That we go to lunch with them, whatever they need, we're there. And it's interesting to me that there are now twice as many survivors as there were years ago. There's now 40 survivors attached to HMTC, and it's amazing. But many of them were babies during the Holocaust, very different than my father, who in 1950 was like 40 years old when I was born. So you can't really compare it. And many of them have knowledge about what happened to them through their parents, because they were 2 or 3 or 1. And so, and they have a very different viewpoint. They grew up in America, many of them. So, but no matter who you are, wherever you are in the age bracket, survivors have this ability to be resilient, respectful, and they are very tolerant of people, much more than you would think. They are extraordinarily tolerant.
You are spot on.
They want you to think about accepting everybody and not hating. It's amazing.
It really is amazing. You are true. Every single one of them, they say the same thing. They're always about. They are incredible people, and maybe that's why, for me, who doesn't have the connection that you have to the survivor world, I'm just so drawn to them because I find them incredible.
And they talk about loving and caring. And, they're just incredible people with such resilience and they're happy. Many of them are very happy in what they do and how they live. And having children and grandchildren are their greatest achievement, which is one of the things that I always say about my mom. She never really had any of that, and I in turn never had a mother.
Right.
So. That part of my life was very sad, actually, because I think my life would have been different had I had a mom.
Yeah, sure.
And my children didn't have grandparents either, because both the grandmothers died at very young ages. So I love what I do here. it's a journey that I'm still on. So
Yes.
we'll see.
Well, we're very grateful to have you and your guidance and your wisdom and your love and all the things that you do. So thank you so much on behalf of HMTC for the work you do. And thank you so much. And thank you, everyone who's watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time for Legacy Chronicles.